We would like to open with a quote from Russian novelist and philosopher Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Quote, "Human rights are a fine thing, but how can we make ourselves sure that our rights do not expand at the expense of the rights of others? A society with unlimited rights is incapable of standing to adversity. A stable society is achieved not by balancing opposing forces, but by conscious self-limitation, by the principle that we are always duty-bound to defer to the sense of moral justice." With this quote in mind, we would like to segue into our stance, that people should not have complete autonomy when it comes to making decisions about their body due to the mindset of my body, my choice. We hold a stance due to a variety of ethical concerns about complete autonomy and due to the knowledge of the legal and organizational framework of American and most other societies. We still do hold the position that some level of bodily autonomy is needed, yet we particularly disagree with the notion of complete autonomy. To have the right to do anything that one wishes with their own body can have catastrophic implications for themselves and others. The specific reasons why total autonomy cannot be achieved can be organized into 4 guiding principles. These include the welfare principle, the legal moralism principle, the paternalism principle, and the harm principle. Each speaker will be elaborating on the definitions and contents of one of our 4 principles, and the first will be me with the welfare principle. To define it, it is the principle that some autonomy must be sacrificed for the benefit of society or all. Basically, that there are unavoidable circumstances in which some autonomy must be relinquished for the benefit of society. To use an example, we're going to use the case of Henrietta Lacks. To drastically simplify, Henrietta Lacks was a woman who, upon going to have her cervical cancer checked, was found to have cancer cells that seemingly multiplied endlessly. These cells, the HeLa cells as they would be dubbed, were the first immortalized human cells, meaning they wouldn't die after a few days in lab conditions. They proved to have a monumental impact on the medical developments of the future. With these cells came an ability to test in longer and more varied ways than times past. The HeLa cells have been used in the testing of polio vaccines, testing and treatment of viral diseases like HPV, Zika, herpes, and mumps. Joe Tijo and Albert Levin's description of the 23 chromosome model for humans, was previously thought to be 24, was achievable through the HeLa cells. And actually, a direct linkage was found using the HeLa cells between HPV-18 and the kind of cervical cancer that would eventually tragically take Henrietta's life. To dial this back, the HeLa cells were taken from Henrietta Lacks without her knowledge nor consent. In essence, Henrietta Lacks' complete bodily autonomy was indeed violated for the greater tangible good and welfare of all society. And while the ethics of the HeLa cells have and will continue to be debated, fundamentally, without the taking of the HeLa cells from Henrietta Lacks, so much of our knowledge and techniques for treating diseases and illnesses would simply be gone or drastically altered. The other point for welfare is vaccination. Vaccinations are a technical violation of complete bodily autonomy to benefit the entire health of all society. Vaccinations have drastically aided in the improvement and better health of humanity by giving people a way of fighting off particularly deadly or contagious diseases. It's through concerted vaccines efforts that diseases like smallpox, measles, and hopefully eventually COVID have been largely removed as a global threat and as one that heavily affects society. And we will touch on this again later, but full vaccine efficacy comes with broad but light social restrictions on complete bodily autonomy to ensure that everyone is safe. And these overall restrictions of autonomy throughout all of this is in the name of the welfare principle, and among the other principles we'll talk about, operates with similar logic to the social contract, which once again, to briefly summarize, is an agreement among members of a society that certain freedoms must be sacrificed in order to achieve a greater societal good or order, so just the greater good. It's discussed and made popular by academics like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And speakers like John Locke and Thomas Hobbes were integral in our nation's early political organization. That brings us on to our next principle, the legal moralism principle.
The principle of legal moralism is the philosophical idea that society should make laws based around what is believed to be morally sound, emphasizing the precedent of such actions. With regards to our second point, laws have been set in place that would simply not allow complete bodily autonomy. Vaccines are an example of this. Many high schools, colleges, and daycares require you to be vaccinated in order to attend. In Pennsylvania, the PA Department of Health Regulations states that to go to school, you need 4 doses of tetanus, 4 doses of polio, 2 doses of measles, and 2 doses of hepatitis B, and 2 doses of varicella. In time, where vaccines have been added to the list depending on where you go to school. Many colleges and universities now enforce required COVID vaccinations. Over 1,000 have already required the mandate of the shot, and many still get added every day. Not only can this be found in school, but in the workforce as well. Healthcare workers are legally required to get the COVID vaccine. People in the military are also enforced, and many other private businesses are required as well. Not only in the military are you required to get the COVID shot, but 17 other vaccinations. This shows that people cannot have complete bodily autonomy because of how the law interferes. Another example of this would be laws that prohibit drug use as an example of legal moralism. Through drug use only affects the private life of the individual who take them. Drugs are still outlawed. This is because society at large believes that drugs lead to harm and therefore their use is immoral. If one is to say, my body, my choice, that would mean changing the existing laws surrounding drug use, making all drugs, including alcohol, legal and accessible to anyone of any age who can make decisions to try them. Clearly, this would end poorly and lead to a lot of suffering, particularly in children who were too young to understand the consequences of their decision. Now on to our next principle, paternalism.
Transitioning to our third principle is paternalism. The dictionary definition of paternalism is the action that limits a person's or group's liberty of autonomy is intended to promote their own good. Paternalism is used very widely when it comes to this matter of bodily autonomy, to stop a person from harm in the intention to benefit a person. Medical care is one aspect everyday life that heavily weighs in on this matter. When someone who physically cannot make their own rational and unconstrained decisions because of the medical condition they are in, they would then need someone else to make their own decisions about their physical well-being for them. Conditions including comatose, brain damage, psychosis, mentally impaired, or drug-induced state, the patient does not have the ability to actually make a decision for their own body, which proves that a person cannot have full bodily autonomy. NHTSA.gov states, of the 222,215 passenger vehicle occupants killed in 2019, 47% were not wearing seatbelts. Seatbelts saved an estimated of 14,955 lives and could have saved an additional 2,549 people if they had been wearing seatbelts in 2017 alone. Another statistic pertaining to seatbelt usage, bike helmet usage is helmets.org explains 97% of cyclists die by not wearing a helmet. These statistics are proof that people are sometimes better off living by the decisions of those who prioritize safety of people. Numerous paternalistic laws also include speed regulations, labor laws for employees, vaccinations that we just mentioned, and permits for weapons, just to name a few. These paternalistic laws prove that a person is at utmost inability to possess complete bodily autonomy and should not because of the harm it would give to you and others, which leads us into our fourth and final point by Sarah Morar.
Finally, we would like to further elaborate on the harm principle in regards to complete bodily autonomy. The focus of the harm principle is that bodily autonomy is limited in the attempt to stop an individual from causing or prolonging harm to a person or people. This is something that occurs in society every single day. And if that is the case, then it is not possible for complete bodily autonomy to exist. Once it is limited in the slightest, completion ceases to exist. This principle is exercised religiously in modern times, and an example of this would be quarantining. By law, a person's autonomy may be infringed upon to prevent the further spread of a contagious disease, which inherently is preventing harm to others. Quarantining is protected by the U.S. Constitution, which would be our source for that portion of the argument. Furthermore, we would like to close by reaffirming our resolution that people should not have complete bodily autonomy. The actions and or consequences of a person's autonomous decisions should not always be justified. Our quote shares that limitations, including those pertaining to autonomy, are essential to maintaining a stable society. Through our examples, it can be seen how that idea rings true. In the simplest terms, complete bodily autonomy is unachievable in today's society because of the following. There are unavoidable situations in society where some autonomy must be relinquished for the benefit of society and or as a result of laws, and that would be your welfare and legalism principles. Second unjustifiably violated in order to prevent an individual from acting to either benefit or harm themselves. That's your paternalism principle. And lastly would be the harm principle, where the autonomy of individuals is limited to prevent harm to others. Thank you.